It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Tropics and winter weather collide with a clash of the seasons. That's from Weather Channel. The script-reading climate engineering cover-up actors at the Weather Channel continue with this. Hurricanes and winter weather can happen, they say, at the same time, especially with changing weather conditions in the fall. Let's take a moment to clarify and correct what this statement would be if the truth were told. Any kind of weather can now happen almost anywhere at almost any time, given the climate engineering elephant in the equation that's being ever more aggressively denied by official sources because the masses are finally waking up to what is taking place in skies around the world. And when they are fully awake and understand what has been done to them without their knowledge or consent, the liability issues on disrupting the climate completely and totally around the world, the liability issues are incalculable. And those in power will do everything they can to mask this from populations until the last possible moment, which is now likely far closer than almost any dare to imagine. So how desperate are the weather makers to create sensationalized, distract, divide, and polarize headlines by engineering completely absurd surface weather conditions that provide fodder for false narratives and conclusions, and also compel countries around the world to covertly cooperate with climate engineering? Conveniently, just prior to the next COP UN Global Climate Conference, here's a headline that clearly reflects how desperate the geoengineers are. Not surprisingly, this headline is from a website called moneycontrol.com. Saudi Arabian desert receives snowfall for the first time in human history. Think about that. The unforeseen weather events have drawn the attention of meteorologists, even as heavy rain and thunderstorm warnings have been issued by these authorities. Let's take a moment to ponder this. Just before the next global climate conference, heavy rain and thunderstorms in the Saudi desert magically turns into a snowstorm, which has never before occurred in that part of the world in human history. Nothing to see here. Move along. Just nature putting on a show. Never mind the skies full of jet-sprayed chemical ice-nucleating cloud-seeding elements. Search and view the Engineering Winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn far more than most want to know. And search and view this headline: Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorm, which was covered by all major media, but no more. Now Matrix Media pretends it isn't happening and tries to marginalize any that dare to say otherwise. Moving on, more on the Saudi snow and the coming global climate conference and other far more dire headlines in a moment. First, this UN Science Summit. Countries call for the non-use of solar geoengineering. That's from the German website Heinrich Bull Stiftung. Analysis from the report: recent developments at the 79th United Nations General Assembly and its accompanying science summit signal a growing political momentum toward restricting the development and potential deployment of solar geoengineering technologies. Again, over 75 years and counting, and let's all pretend it's just a proposal. They continue, moving forward, it will be interesting to observe, the report says, the strong leadership of like-minded countries advocating for the non-use of solar geoengineering across the globe. It's clear that these efforts offer an opportunity to build momentum toward a global consensus against the use of solar geoengineering. Certainly these other governments know this is being used, but they're maneuvering very cautiously and carefully, because what happens if they stand out from the shadows and point the finger too directly? Issues like Hurricane Otis in Mexico and what just happened in Spain and other countries. Dubai is one. 2 years worth of rain in 6 hours. And we captured in that event, geoengineeringwatch.org captured the signature frequency transmissions in the clouds over the Persian Gulf, directly off the coast of Dubai, the day before and the day of that event. But the bottom line is this. Awareness is growing very, very rapidly now. Climate engineering is the issue that you cannot put in the rearview mirror like so many other issues, and so many people, so many populations will do exactly that if they can, but you can't with this. It's destroying the planet's life support systems by the day. From crop production to fisheries, all is collapsing. And this is on top of all the other forms of human damage to the planet, which too many, especially on alt media, want to try to ignore, pretending that it's only climate engineering that we have to face. We've been horrible stewards of this planet that needs to be remembered and considered. But the bottom line is, from any perspective, there is no legitimate discussion about climate anything without first and foremost addressing climate engineering. Let's move on. From the Rand Corporation, the actual risks of geoengineering. From that report, Hurricane Helene and Milton sparked conspiracy theories, Rand Corporation says, about government-created weather events via geoengineering, the large-scale intentional manipulation of the Earth's processes to modify weather. These theories, Rand Corporation says, are false. There is no evidence that any entity created the storms. I don't know anyone who said they were created. We just said they were steered, which we have proven with the recordings of the frequency transmissions that did the steering. The Rand Corporation pushback propaganda then continues with this. The spread of misinformation about government involvement in disasters has become something of a trend lately. Wow. Imagine my sense of relief. Governments, especially including our own, would never be, quote, involved in disasters, end quote. My thanks to the author of this Rand Corporation damage control disinformation piece, one Emi Yonekura, Emmyonekura. One can only hope that Emma Yonekura takes the time to view the geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming, which proves conclusively that climate intervention operations are ongoing, and perhaps then Miss Yonekura might reconsider the part she has chosen to play regarding the fate of the planet's remaining life support systems, thus humanity's and the entire web of life's fate as well. The Rand Corporation climate engineering cover-up propaganda continues with this. While major actors, including the United States, China, and the United Kingdom, have experimented with weather modification in the past, hostile use of environmental modification has been banned globally for decades. Well, there you have it. The criminal cabals masquerading as legitimate governments would never, ever do anything destructive that would violate international laws or treaties. Yes, what a relief. Thank you for letting me know, Emi Yonekura. This next Rand Corporation climate engineering cover-up statement alludes to a bit of truth, the same truths that compels the Rand Corporation and their criminal accomplices to deny the reality of climate engineering in the first place. Here's their statement, quote, geoengineering comes with real environmental risks, such as potential changes to precipitation patterns, potential water pollution, keep that in mind, and nutrient runoff, ecosystem disruption, putting it mildly, and large energy and water demands. Implementing geoengineering, they say, could lead to geopolitical risks as well, aka weather warfare. Real environmental risks from the secondary effects of geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection, also include ozone depletion, ocean acidification, and a dangerous rebound effect if geoengineering is stopped. There's no if. One way or the other, geoengineering will be stopped. That may be with the collapse of everything everywhere all at once, but it will stop, at which point we face what's known as double catastrophe scenario, a whiplash rebound response from the planet, if there's any life support systems left, that will be even more catastrophic than anything we've seen so far. So much energy built up in this system. Here's a final excerpt from the Rand Corporation report titled The Actual Risks of Geoengineering. Currently, some non-hostile weather modification efforts persist, particularly in China, they say, where cloud seeding reportedly has been used to protect agriculture and modify weather in advance of public events, including the 2008 Olympics. Oh no, it's just conspiracy theory, right? That's what we're told here. Routine and openly stated in other countries. Let's stop there. That's all the blatant lying I can stomach from the Rand Corporation. First, All weather climate modification is hostile, period. Even the openly disclosed small-scale cloud seeding operations are toxically disrupting weather patterns. How inconceivably worse are the countless climate engineering jets all over the world, any one of which can dump as much as 100 tons of toxic nanoparticles into our skies in a single payload. Rain that is artificially made to fall in one location means that the rain in question obviously didn't make it to wherever it was otherwise going. How incredibly simple can this concept be? As I've stated emphatically on the record for 20 years plus, drought deluge scenarios are the hallmark of climate engineering weather warfare operations. Rand Corporation author Emi Yanakura calls this, quote, non-hostile weather modification, and then continues to try and convince us that it's being used to, quote, protect agriculture? Really, Emi? How's that going so far, as agriculture is being systematically annihilated from weather cataclysm everything? And the same holds true as city after city and region after region is devastated by every imaginable form of climate weather catastrophe, forests, crops, everything in between. Next, from yet another spoke in the wheel of criminal corporate control, from the CarnegieEndowment.org. The promises and risks of a controversial approach to cooling the planet. They say solar geoengineering could be a climate lifeline. It's also a gamble with no comprehensive global governance. First, about the Carnegie Endowment's claim of climate engineering being a, quote, lifeline, this question: how's that going so far as the human race and very possibly all life on Earth faces mathematically certain near-term planetary omnicide after 75 years of ever-expanding geoengineering operations, aka weather warfare? Next question: are the atmospheric seeding elements associated with climate intervention operations toxic? Short answer: yes, very much so. On that note, this new report from the New York Post. It's raining forever chemicals in this major city, speaking of New York, and likely everywhere else, researchers warn. PFAS chemicals are practically everywhere. That's the end of the headline. That sounds bad, doesn't it? But it's actually worse, far worse. They're not practically everywhere. They are everywhere, as previous studies have already proven. This report then says chemical companies invented PFAS, again, the forever chemicals, that include 15,000 varieties. 15,000. And it's in every single drop of rain everywhere on planet Earth, proven by peer-reviewed science study. That includes the North Pole, South Pole, top of Mount Everest, everywhere, which means it's in everything. Everything we eat, everything we drink, building up in our systems. Not speculation, not theory, not hypothesis. Proven fact. Let's add this from healthline.com. Are allergies worse in the rain? Question mark. A bit of climate engineering cover up here. The report says some people experience worse allergy symptoms on rainy days. This is like the thunderstorm asthma attacks that put 10,000 people in emergency rooms in Australia on one event. And we're to believe this is just pollen? The report continues. This can happen when damp weather encourages the growth of allergens such as mold and dust. It can also happen when rain breaks up pollen into smaller particles and causes it to scatter further. Never mind the stated objective of the geoengineers to put tens of millions of tons of inconceivably small and thus very inflammatory and dangerous nanoparticles, 100,000 of which can fit across the width of a single human hair, which makes these particles unbelievably insidious and bioavailable. Never mind that. It's just pollen or dust. Let's add this to the equation. Leaves dying and drying to a crisp while still hanging on deciduous trees. Why? Geoengineeringwatch.org worked with UC Minnesota to find out why. A synthesized plant hormone used in agriculture for defoliating orchards and forcing trees into dormancy has been found in our rain. We paid thousands for this testing. Geoengineering Watch paid for this out of our pocket. Why would the weather makers include an element for defoliation, which appears only in fall seeding in rains? Why would they include that in their atmospheric spraying operations? Because daytime and nighttime temperatures are now too warm overall in too many regions to naturally trigger the seasonal deciduous tree leaf drop, which nature has done on her own for time immemorial. When you see a tree in the middle of winter, a deciduous tree fully foliated with stone-dead leaves hanging on that tree, that was not nature. If the wind blows hard enough, it blows the leaves off, and then the climate engineers have accomplished their goal. Looks like the season has changed normally and naturally. There's nothing natural about anything going on right now regarding the Earth's changes we are experiencing, and they will get far worse from here. You can quote me on that. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report. The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass, that is the goal. It will remain the goal. It is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach a critical mass of awareness by starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data, not clickbait speculation designed to get YouTube views. Credible data. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials available on our homepage. Please help us to sound the alarm, and in doing so, learn how to build bridges instead of burning them. When any discussion of climate anything comes up, from any perspective, from anyone in your circles, head them off at the pass. Don't start a battle that distracts from climate engineering. Take this approach, please. Tell them, ask them, how can we have any legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the climate engineering issue? Keep it on that track. If we can expose and stop what's happening in our skies, we can assess clearly the true state of the planet. But we must first stop the climate intervention operations, which is preventing the planet from responding on its own to the damage already done from countless forms of human activity. Too many people ignoring that. They want to pretend that this current loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute till nothing's left paradigm can continue forever. Not going to happen. You can quote me on that as well. Back to the grand facade. From the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Again, there's no such thing. The term's an oxymoron. You can't sustainably continue to develop with finite resources on a finite planet. That is so incredibly simple. How can so many be in such deep denial over that fact? Here's their headline. What will happen at the COP29? That's the coming climate conference. They say question mark. This report continues with this. It may seem like 2024 is almost done, but there's still a lot going to happen on the environmental agenda this year. They then say, we have seen issues in the past when parties feel that the negotiation processes are not conducted transparently. Really? Who would think that? These conferences, for those that don't know, are nothing but smoke and mirrors. No one intends to change business as usual, not until there's nothing left. What goes on there is behind closed doors, nations are pressured to actively or passively participate in the climate engineering insanity. That's what these conferences are actually about. Backtrack to the never before seen in human history snow in Saudi Arabia. That's a demonstration. We've seen this before. This is not new. In previous climate conferences, we have seen record cold at the conference, at the time of the conference, in spite of far above normal temperatures in all surrounding areas. Is that just nature again? No. It's a demonstration of climate engineering and toxic surface cooldowns that can be created by patented processes of chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding. That's what it's about. Let's add this from Reuters. Leaders from key countries to skip COP29 climate summit. That report says world leaders from major economies, including the United States, the European Union, and Brazil, are planning to skip this year's United Nations Climate Change Summit, known as the COP29, in Baku, Azerbaijan. China, Japan, Australia, and Mexico are also absent from the UN's latest agenda for leaders' speeches at COP29. That's because these nations are not about to change anything. Those who control these nations, and ultimately that means those who control the printing of money. That's who is actually in control. Keep that in mind always. Everything else is simply theater. And those who print the money control militaries, thus they control countries, they control matrix media, thus they control the narrative, thus they have so far controlled public opinion, although when the food shelves empty out, the public may start to question what they thought was true and what wasn't. About the hurricane season, no, it's not over yet, nor are the potential objectives and agendas associated with it. Earlier this week from GB News, U.S. weather, giant depression in the Atlantic threatens to spawn new hurricane hell. With that in mind, new from USA Today, Hurricane Rafael knocks out power to Cuba. Forecasters are puzzled by path, quote unquote. I'll get back to that in a moment. Hurricane Rafael, this report states, made landfall in western Cuba as a Category 3 storm Wednesday of this week, carrying sustained winds of up to 115 miles per hour that brought down the island's electrical grid again before the system headed to the Gulf of Mexico. The pounding from Rafael comes as Cuba is still recovering from the initial collapse of its electrical grid October 18th, followed by the impact of Hurricane Oscar. Let's add this from the Weather Channel cast of climate engineering cover-up actors. Hurricane Rafael's track has changed. Where will it go next? Question mark. They say Hurricane Rafael is still lashing western Cuba, this is from earlier this week, as the storm's center emerges into the Gulf. Now, remember the USA Today report I just covered, which stated that, quote, forecasters are puzzled by the new path of Hurricane Rafael. With that in mind, this new report from the script-reading climate engineering cover-up actors at AccuWeather, all of them doing the same job, reading a script, playing their part for the manipulators of the matrix. Here's their headline: Hurricane Rafael taking a turn away from U.S. Question, did someone just alter the script? You decide. And about the constant battering of weather-weary Cubans who have been the target of Western government punishments for decades, is it just a coincidence that they have had to endure yet another 1-2 punch of weather catastrophes? For the record, how many times have I stated over how many years on this broadcast and other interviews that climate engineering has long since been the crown jewel covert weapon of the controllers, a weapon with which populations, and thus their governments, can be brought to their knees without said populations ever even knowing they were under assault. Just blame nature. How very well this serves the money-printing manipulators of global dominance. In their own words, quote, full spectrum dominance. In the words of former U.S. President Lyndon Johnson 62 years ago, on film and on the record, quote, he who controls the weather controls the world. Please, please connect the puzzle pieces. On that note, also from USA Today, behind Hurricane Rafael, another storm is brewing in the Caribbean. We'll see what that does. On the subject of altered scheduled weather scripts, the following sfgate.com report is from a week ago, but it's important and revealing. Big change made to snow forecast for California's Sierra Nevada. The report continues. The bad news is that the storm, which is expected to deliver a shot of winter-like weather, is carrying less moisture than originally expected. 3 days ago, the report says the National Weather Service projected that the highest elevations of the Tahoe Basin along the Sierra Crest could receive up to 2 feet of snow from the cold front. The latest forecast now predicts only as much as 9 inches. The report then states, even though the storm is trending drier, forecasters are still warning of dangerous conditions on roads. First, about the drying up of this storm. The endothermic reacting chemical ice nucleating elements have exactly that effect. That's how it cools things down. When you have an evaporative cooler, which people in dry, arid regions know how that works, water evaporates and that endothermic reaction creates cooler air. And that's part of what's happening here. It's just a more extreme form because there's chemical ice nucleating elements being used. There's also surfactants in this mix. Surfactants are what makes soap soap. So we have what amounts to soap-soaked snow. And yes, it's extremely dangerous to drive in. It's unlike any form of naturally nucleated snow. I've been driving in snow since I was a kid. What falls now is very, very different. Not the same. And many people are noticing that now. And in addition, these chemically nucleated elements, this frozen material that's extremely cold to the touch, tends to sublimate, which means even though there might be a certain amount of snowpack, not nearly as much of that ends up being runoff moisture, because sublimation means that much of that chemically nucleated moisture is going straight from a solid to a gas and bypassing the liquid phase. And so we have protracted drought even when we were told we had enough snow to mitigate drought, which is a lie. And in fact, the true severity of the droughts are being radically understated. I'll get to that shortly. First, about the patented processes of chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding. From CNBC, first ever snowfall in Saudi Arabia's desert. Let's add this from firstpost.com. First time in history. How did a Saudi Arabian desert see snowfall? Question mark. From that report, heavy rains and significant hailstorms have swept across parts of the Saudi Arabian desert since last week. They're cooling the region down in preparation for this engineered event and the sensationalized headlines they wanted to generate from it. The report continues, the strange weather took a dramatic turn when the Al Jawaf, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, region of Saudi Arabia witnessed snowfall for the first time in human history, creating a visual spectacle never before seen in the arid landscape. So, the report asks, what triggered this unexpected weather phenomenon? Question mark. What's the last thing you would expect to find in a desert? Question mark. Lashing rains? Question mark. A chilly climate? Question mark. Wintry snow? Question mark. They finish with this. Surprisingly, all of these are true for a desert in Saudi Arabia, which has recently morphed into a stunning winter wonderland. Well, there it is. That's exactly the kind of media coverage the controllers and the climate engineers wanted right before the coming global climate conference. Saudi deserts turned into a, quote, stunning winter wonderland, end quote. And it's not even winter yet. Imagine that. How many who push the mind-numbingly false narratives of global cooling and coming ice age will now claim that the Saudi snow in the desert is proof of their narrative? No, such a conclusion couldn't be further from the truth. What just took place in the Saudi desert is proof of climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding. So, about the first post report questions of how did it snow in a desert? Question mark. What triggered this unexpected weather phenomenon? Question mark. Does first post then offer any credible reason? No. Do they state any reason at all for the Saudi snowstorm? No. At the risk of being redundant, here's one more sensationalized headline, the kind that the controllers and the climate engineers seek to create, the kind that provides false conclusion fodder for those that want desperately to pretend that the breaking headlines that I will cover later in this broadcast are false. Except that they aren't. First, this from Metro News UK. Saudi Arabian desert turned into, again, winter wonderland for the first time in history. They then say, rolling dunes, typically golden and sun-baked light, transformed by snow and balls of ice. This is what the deserts in Saudi Arabia look like right now. To ensure sensationalized winter headlines in the U.S., so-called winter storm Anya was whipped up by the weather makers. A so-called winter storm that was fueled with atmospheric moisture straight out of the record-warm Gulf of California and the record-warm Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, that makes sense. More sensationalized headlines thanks to the climate engineers and chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations. From the Weather Channel Climate Engineering Cover-Up Corporation, Winter Storm Anya, feet of snow will pile up. The report says a cutoff low continues to meander through the southern Rockies and plains, causing multiple days of heavy snow, which is making travel dangerous. Again, soap-soaked snow. Surfactants are in this mix. Flooding, rain, and severe storms are also possible. Same as Saudi Arabia. Thunderstorms that suddenly turn into snow. And they call this now changing over to snow. Even at temperatures far above freezing, it starts out, gets colder as this process continues. That's how it works. Here's another from the Weather Channel. Watch wildlife chill out in Colorado snow. Really? Is it funny to the Weather Channel climate engineering cover-up actors that chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations are impacting what's left of wildlife populations? Chemically nucleated frozen material is extremely cold to the touch, as I've stated so many times. It often forms a crust below the surface that is devastatingly difficult for wildlife like deer, elk, buffalo, and caribou to penetrate with their hooves as they forage for food. Once mind-numbingly massive herds of caribou in the Arctic, some over 1 million strong, are now down to a few thousand or less at best. Total collapse. And while the climate engineers continue to wreak havoc around the world with their toxic cloud seeding elements, Matrix Media is keeping populations entertained and distracted. Bread and circus till the brutal bitter end, which, if we remain on the current course, is so much closer than almost any dare to imagine. And those that still don't believe it will soon wait and see. On any given day, the power structure, when they realize the population is waking up, will likely play much bigger cards. Another Weather Channel sensationalized engineered winter weather report. Light snow leaves Utah roads a mess. They say early November snow in Utah's Cottonwood Canyons creates slick conditions on mountain roads. Again, soap-soaked snow. That's what it amounts to. And in the U.S. West, this, also from the Weather Channel, tale of fire and ice. Mountain fire near Los Angeles jumps in size. A wildfire in Southern California is threatening hundreds of homes and structures as it burns wildly amid strong winds and extremely low humidity. Please search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Source of ignition is a separate subject, completely separate. The point is, what is establishing the conditions for these fires to burn with such ferocity? Look up. You'll find your answer. From the UK Guardian, wind-driven wildfire rages in California with scores of homes charred. Mountain fire in Ventura County has destroyed 132 homes, damaged 88. It's probably worse by the time I get to the broadcasts here. Not contained at all. Back-to-back years of strong rainy seasons seeded these landscapes with grasses that turned to tinder after getting baked in the summer heat, combined with low humidity and the region's natural tendency to burn. Its natural tendency to burn is because of decades of climate engineering. These particles that have shown up in hundreds of rain tests from all over the world, aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, they're all incendiaries. There's an incendiary dust on top of cutting off the precipitation, toxifying rain, which kills soils, kills root systems, thus causes dead foliage everywhere. But these particles are incendiaries. In fact, aluminum nanoparticles are such a powerful incendiary that they're used in military demolitions. None of this disclosed by the so-called experts or official agencies, all of them protecting their paychecks and pensions till the brutal, bitter end. The report then states, Gavin Newsom, California's governor, announced on Wednesday that the state had secured federal assistance from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to help ensure the availability of vital resources to Ventura. How benevolent, Gavin, when you know what's causing this. And Gavin Newsom knows because I presented this exact data to him in his office at the Capitol with his top aide, and he's done exactly nothing but continue to cover this up. Is he not a criminal accomplice to the climate engineering crimes? How could he not be? One more headline of interest from the Weather Channel. Blinding sun glare shuts down interstate. Officials in one state decided they needed to regularly shut down part of the busy highway. When you put light scattering particles in the sky, you create very intense light refraction, which makes the sky very difficult to look at, especially with a direct shot of the sun shining into your windshield. These light scattering particles are wreaking havoc on everything, every part of the web of life, from the clouds to the ground. Also from this week, this one from the LA Times, still no snow on Mount Fuji. So we have snow in the Saudi desert. We have a snowstorm whipped up out of the record-warm Gulf of Mexico and Gulf of California, starting at temperatures far above freezing, but there's no snow on Mount Fuji. They've, since this headline, had a slight dusting. But think about that. Think about these radical anomalies in both directions. None of this is natural. None of the earth changes that are happening right now are natural. It's ludicrous to think so. Statistically, mathematically, it's a virtual impossibility. Again, we're back to running someone over in a crosswalk, shooting them, stabbing them, beating them, burning them, and claiming they died of a heart attack. It's just natural. The earth changes that are happening right now are not natural. Climate engineering is a massive, massive part of them that must be disclosed. But every form of human activity that interferes with the planet's life support systems is a part of the problem. From the UK Guardian, nearly all of US states are facing droughts, an unprecedented number. They say more than 150 million people and 318 million acres of crops are affected by droughts after summer of record heat. Every U.S. state except Alaska and Kentucky facing drought. How many times have I stated this? Climate intervention operations and the desiccant particles. Aluminum's a desiccant. They used it in deodorant, right? We all know that. However harmful it was, they used it. These are drying out precipitation. That's part of what the climate engineers are myopically trying to accomplish, to reduce atmospheric RH buildup, water humidity buildup. Very myopic, destructive attempt. They're stopping the formation of natural cloud cover, creating drought. Search the engineering drought section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more. If you look at presentations I did a decade ago, engineered drought catastrophe target California, everything I said then has happened. This is exactly what I presented to Newsom in the Capitol. It had to happen if these programs continued. I told Newsom so, and here we are. And this is just the beginning, going to get far worse from here. After a short geoengineeringwatch.org announcement, this breaking report, quote, essential to act now to prevent chaotic climate breakdown. I'll get to that report in a moment. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 483, November 9th, 2024. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering, aka weather warfare. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. I want to express my deepest gratitude to all those that are marching forward in this fight. It is our collective efforts that can still make a difference at this late hour. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities, now with over 25 million views on YouTube. My deepest gratitude to all those that have helped that to happen. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. How do we reach those that still aren't looking up? Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, a picture's worth 1,000 words. We pass these materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. I live for the day when this insanity in our sky is exposed and halted. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, shirts, photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on this issue is the great imperative of our time. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. And to all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, you have my deepest gratitude now and forever. Pressing on, headline mentioned before this announcement, essential to act now to prevent chaotic climate breakdown, warns UN chief. The report states, on the eve of the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, Antonio Guterres says dangers are underestimated as irreversible tipping points near. No, they're not near. They're in the rearview mirror. We are past tipping points, all of them. The question is now, will anyone survive the ride to the bottom of the canyon? This report says the world is still underestimating the risk of catastrophic climate breakdown and ecosystem collapse. The UN Secretary acknowledged this in the run-up to the COP29 Global Climate Conference, acknowledging that the rise in global heating is on course to soar past 1.5 C. If only that were true. That's a blatant, glaring lie. Based on unfiltered frontline temperature data, we are likely past 3.5 degrees C right now. Chemical ice nucleation is part of what's hiding that. It skews the data. When they can chemically cool a shallow layer of air at the surface and take lots of temperatures in that artificial zone, it skews the overall true warming of the planet, which is being further fueled overall by climate engineering, short-term toxic cooldowns at the cost of an even worse warming. They say for the next 2 weeks, governments will gather by the Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan to discuss how to increase financing for climate adaptation and mitigation. You can't adapt on a dead planet. There's no mitigation. There's no amount of money printing that can help that. Keep that in mind. Let's add this from the Washington Post. Scientists may have figured out why a potent greenhouse gas is rising. The answer is scary. They say methane emissions spiked starting in 2020, and scientists say they have found the culprit. Methane blowouts. And they blame the microbes. They don't blame anything else. They don't mention climate engineering. For how many years have I been trying to sound the alarm on the methane explosions happening in the Arctic on the seafloor? How many years? And the Washington Post wants to pretend this is some sort of breaking news about the true state of the planet, aka the true severity of unfolding planetary meltdown. If and when people don't believe what they can see with their own eyes, there's nothing else you can do to wake them up. At that point, it's between them and their maker. With all that in mind, this new report from the UK Guardian, quote, people do not want to believe it's true, end quote. The photographer capturing the vanishing of glaciers. Take a look. Please take the time to view Chasing Ice, a documentary online. Film footage of the total meltdown of the cryosphere, the polar regions. No politics, just film footage. Please take a look without bias, preconception, or programming. Let's add this breaking news. Not good, but definitely no surprise. First, from BBC. This is from Thursday of this week. This year set to be the first to breach 1.5 degrees C global warming limit. No, total blatant lie. We are likely past 3.5 degrees C now. There's no going back. The BBC report then states it's now virtually certain that 2024, a year punctuated by intense heat waves and deadly storms, will be the world's warmest on record. That's according to projections by the European Climate Service. Scientists say this should act as an alarm call ahead of next week's UN climate conference in Azerbaijan. Again, remember and consider the Gulf of Mexico-fueled chemical ice-nucleated snowstorm in several U.S. states and the Saudi desert snowstorm, a covert demonstration of what climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation operations can do, just in time for the climate conference. What a surprise. From Earth.org, this 2024, quote, virtually certain to be the hottest in history, marking the new milestone in temperature records. From that report, after the hottest summer on record, 2024 is now well on track to be the hottest year ever, and the first year with an annual temperature surpassing the 1.5 C limit. Again, false, far worse than that. If they continue, though, beyond a 2 degree C warming limit, experts warn that critical tipping points will be breached, leading to devastating and potentially irreversible consequences for Earth's systems that sustain a hospitable planet. We are already through the guardrail. Those that don't believe that will soon. Those that think that these reports from Earth.org, BBC, and others are exaggerated, no. I wish that were true. I absolutely wish that were true. It's far worse than anything they're stating. We face near-term, mathematically certain extinction on the current course. Not an opinion, statistical trajectory. We must completely change course or we're done. Next, from Fox Weather, Earth experiencing warmest year on record. Again, scientists say. And about Earth's oceans. Yes, there's only one. It's all connected. Also in total meltdown. First from thetelegraph.com. The world record of heat in the oceans is broken. This is an article from late 2023, but it's imperative to lead up to the next headline. This report says the oceans have reached their hottest temperatures ever recorded, which is having dire consequences for the health of our planet. They are in total implosion mode. Coral reefs dying everywhere. Next headline is about that. Kelp dying everywhere. Fisheries collapsing everywhere. The temperatures continue to rise. And what is one example of the consequences? Just one of countless examples. From developmentaid.org, this new headline: coral bleaching at highest rates ever, marine life, environmental, and livelihoods at risk. It's over for them. Now, what we're striving for is to salvage some part of the planet's remaining life support systems. And people are still caught up in Caribbean cruises, trips to Disney World, and sports games. From CNN, Emperor Penguin turns up on Australian beach, thousands of miles from home. This kind of story breaks my heart, absolutely breaks my heart. A spokesman described the penguin as, quote, malnourished. 4 out of 5 emperor penguin colonies analyzed in Antarctica, in the Antarctic Peninsula, saw no chicks survive in 2022. The area experienced enormous loss of sea ice. Let's keep going. From Yahoo News, more harbingers of a rapidly dying planet. This new report: scientists sound alarm after documenting mass evacuation of sperm whales. Quote, a sentinel signal, end quote. The report says scientists have made an alarming discovery about the mass departure of sperm whales from the waters near Mexico, signaling a shift in the larger ecosystem. They continue, sperm whales are, quote, somewhat resilient to climate change, but are susceptible to issues when the food chain changes, as appears to have happened in the Gulf of California. It hasn't just changed, it's completely collapsed, which also breaks my heart. I have spent much time diving in solitude in the Gulf of California where no one is. No one. I've seen things there that I wish I could share with everyone. 500 plus pound Gulf groupers face to face with me, circled by Dorado, schools of Dorado circling me in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, diving in solitude. If you don't know what a Dorado is, they're called the rainbow fish. They are so incredibly beautiful, and I've never even heard of anybody being circled by schools. I've seen this, and now know it's gone. And people are pretending their life is going to go on as it is? From phys.org, climate change is contributing to drought in the American West. Even without rainfall deficits, scientists find there is rainfall deficits. They record rainfall in certain urban areas like in Northern California, Redding. Even if Redding gets its normal annual rainfall of 33 inches, the orographically enhanced rain in the surrounding mountains is not taking place because of the aerosolization of the atmosphere. So areas that should get 3 or 4 times as much as Redding are not getting that additional rainfall, and they're not disclosing that. Let's add this report from earthobservatory.nasa.gov. Drought expands across U.S. West. Drier and warmer than normal weather dominated the country during much of October, caused by a strong ridge of high pressure. Think ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome. Climate engineering is the single greatest causal factor for the protracted droughts around the world. The laws of physics make clear it must rain more overall on a rapidly warming planet. As I covered in last week's broadcast, that's being acknowledged now that it's not. They don't know why, because they won't acknowledge climate engineering. Climate engineering, altering atmospheric pressure zones and filling the sky with light scattering, evaporation thwarting particles that diminish overall rainfall and trap heat, thus creating more overall heat on planet Earth. From the UK Guardian, heat wave to turn parts of Australia into, quote, one of the hottest places in the world this week. Another from the UK Guardian, 2 sides of the same coin. Governments stress links between climate and natural collapse. There's nothing natural about what's occurring right now. That narrative is so patently false. And again, let's build bridges. Anyone brings up the subject of climate anything, stress to them there's no legitimate discussion about it from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. Next, from Anthropocene magazine, for those unfamiliar with the term, Anthropocene means the age of man. The idea of burying wood to store carbon is so simple it almost sounds absurd. But is it? Question mark. Yeah, it's absurd, all right. Let's cut down forests and bury the wood to sequester carbon. In the meantime, those forests will never grow back because of the damage already done to the planet. Those forests are the planet's last remaining life support systems. And yes, let's cut them down and bury them. What a brilliant idea. Like so many other brilliant ideas from the so-called climate science community, like putting Brazil-sized balloons in space, covering the polar regions with reflective tarps. It goes on and on. Total stupidity. From MSN, scientists make disturbing discovery in Lake Superior. Here's what it could mean for the future of the iconic water body. Destroyed ozone layer, increased thermal energy buildup, algae blooms. That's what's happening in Lake Superior and so many other bodies of water that are now dying. Speaking of dying fish, from the sentientscience.org website, fish farms kill billions more wild fish than previous estimates stated. That's no surprise. They knew. They simply didn't disclose the fact that it is a massive net negative to grow fish in farms, and it's the most toxic food you can eat, by the way, farm salmon, and it kills billions more wild fish. How is that helping anything? Total moronicism. Industrialized, militarized insanity hurtling us toward near-term planetary omnicide. From MSN, farmers sound the alarm for our global food supply. A staple crop becomes increasingly difficult to grow. They're talking about potatoes because nighttime temperatures are rising so quickly, potatoes aren't growing, not cooling off at night. Nighttime temperatures are rising twice as fast as daytime highs. Climate engineering helping to trap heat at night. And I can say firsthand, as trying to unsuccessfully now continue to grow potatoes in Northern California, they all tanked because we had temperatures in the formerly lush forest in Northern California on the east side of Lake Shasta, temperatures over summer, 95 degrees at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. That's 30 degrees above what it should be. 30. Does anyone think that's normal or that can continue or be sustained in any way, shape, or form? What's another way the climate engineers are decimating food crops? Severe hail. Baseball and softball size hail, a sign of chemical ice nucleation. From thewatchers.org, severe hailstorm destroys 11,000 acres of greenhouses in Spain. This is no accident. None. This took place a day before the worst floods in Spain's history hit Valencia. Now we have Barcelona as well. What an absolute circus of insanity it all is, led by criminal cabals masquerading as legitimate governments and the program's so-called experts they've produced. Consider this timeless wisdom from German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. Education perverts the mind, since we are directly opposing the natural development of our mind by obtaining ideas first and observations last. This is why so few men of learning have such sound common sense, as is quite common among the illiterate. With that nugget of wisdom in mind, this recent report from mendingthecampus.org. Higher education shouldn't mean higher indoctrination. From that report, university faculty and staff face one of the oldest problems on campus, what free speech means. Our students are entering an extraordinarily polarized world that encourages them to think only in binary terms. Yes, this is right, or no, that is wrong. It is our responsibility to equip them with the critical thinking skills to navigate this world, not to indoctrinate them. We can't teach people to be critical thinkers if we don't allow for different opinions, views, and belief systems on campus and in classrooms. To forbid expressing other views risks indoctrinating students instead of educating them. Indoctrinated students have no room to question, challenge, debate, or defend positions on complex issues. In fact, it leaves no room to even fathom that other perspectives may indeed exist. If we want more young people to see the world through open eyes like these students, we must encourage them to see others as people. If we want them to develop critical thinking skills, we must encourage healthy and civil discussion. If we want them to develop a sense of nuance to navigate today's world, we must allow them to question, debate, discuss, and even especially if they disagree. Without these supports, we risk students falling into the false security of indoctrinated belief. What or who are we forbidden to discuss, critique, or criticize, and why? Follow the money, and you'll find out what few want to know. Those who control it control matrix media, the narrative, on everything from climate engineering denial to conflict zones. The aim of totalitarian education has never been to instill convictions, but to destroy the capacity to form them in the first place. That's from Hannah Arendt. Now, let's add this from Zbigniew Brzezinski, former U.S. advisor to presidents from Johnson all the way up to 2017. This individual was as bad as evil as they come. He said this: Technology will make available to the leaders of major nations techniques for controlling secret warfare of which only a bare minimum of the security forces need to be appraised. Techniques of weather modification could be employed to produce prolonged periods of drought or storm. We are there. The bottom line is this. So-called higher learning institutions have long since become matrix controlled in too many ways. Universities have become mass indoctrination facilities, and when your training is complete, you're issued your certificate of indoctrination. Only a select few have emerged with a clear view of the wider horizon. From the smoke and mirrors, science is what we say it is, mass indoctrination institutions. Those that are wholeheartedly committed to this must-win battle to turn the tide, starting with stopping the ongoing climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare, know what it is to face total rejection and ostracization by family and perhaps former friends. Those that want desperately to cling to their denial and delusion that the current paradigm of loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute will somehow continue magically into the future forever, except that it won't. All just castles in the sand. The reality we have known is already circling the drain. For countless souls in third world nations and matrix-manipulated conflict zones, their lives have long since been thrown to the wind. So again, for those that refuse to hear the truth, that refuse to investigate, that refuse to face reality, let alone summon the moral courage to do their part to change it for the better, they often spew out a special kind of contempt and anger toward any that try to deliver the unwanted facts. Such individuals are, in many ways, so completely and obsessively compelled to cling to their delusional frame of reality that they vehemently reject anyone that dares to rain on their pursuit of personal pleasures parade. Stop. Deeply consider why you are here at this most critical moment in time. Consider what matters and what not. Consider what is, in fact, in your control, making your voice heard while you can, while it can yet make a difference, regardless of the resistance you will face from family and friends. To thine own self be true. Never forget that. Share credible data from a credible source. Make every day count. Time is not on our side. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from Geoengineeringwatch.org.